to see you. How you doing?
Brian, my man, it's always great to be with you.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it as always. I go through your Twitter and I love going through it and reading some of these tweets. And one of the tweets that sticks out for me that you put out there in the last couple of days was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you said it's always very difficult to indict a former president, but it shouldn't be difficult to indict a president who tried to overthrow our democracy, right? Can you speak to that?
Like, Brian, to me, it's just so obvious. When you step back and think about why the hell we're still here, why there's a committee, a January 6th committee, why 70 or 80% of the Republican Party don't believe Joe Biden won, why we're still talking about the 2020 election, why the country has been put through this. We've all been put through this because that son of a biscuit wasn't big enough, man enough, decent enough, or patriotic enough to accept the will of the people. I mean, think about that. He wasn't a big enough man to be a good loser. And so this whole country's been put through hell. And I'll add this. He did conspire to overthrow an American election. He conspired to do that. I don't know if he's going to be indicted, Brian, but man, if that's not a crime, I don't know what is.
If you had an opportunity to be in a room with Garland, based on what you know, what would you say to him?
I'd say that. And I want to be very careful, Brian, because I know there are a lot of good friends on the left and Democrats who are saying he's got to be indicted. Garland's got to indict him. No, what Garland has to do is follow the facts, follow the evidence, and follow the law. We don't want our attorney general to be influenced by politics. My fear is, and this is what I'd tell Garland, my fear is he may not indict Trump because he's afraid of the political ramifications. That then is a political decision as well, and that would be wrong.
Speaking with former presidential candidate Joe Walsh, you also tweeted out, and this has been a big story the last couple of days. I want to get your thoughts on this. Secret Service, allegedly, these texts have disappeared. Emails allegedly have disappeared as well. What do you make of this story?
It's clear to me, my friend, that the Secret Service under Trump, many members of the Secret Service under Trump became politically loyal to him, the man. Instead of being loyal to that office and that position. Secret Service agents are supposed to physically protect a president. They're not supposed to politically protect a president. The missing texts, the refusal of the Secret Service to testify under oath, to contest what Cassidy Hutchinson said, and that Secret Service agent, Brian, who Trump weirdly promoted to deputy chief of staff in the White House. I think we're going to find out there was a cadre of Secret Service agents that was solely focused on protecting Trump, the man, and that's wrong.
Agree. What do you make of the many argument on the right that say there's no cross-examination, zero cross-examination? This is a shift show, as Sean Hannity would say, and the fact that there's no cross-examination, no credibility with this January 6th committee. What do you say to your Republican friends when they make those statements?
I'd say Kevin McCarthy's an idiot. I'd start there. Kevin McCarthy is an idiot. I want to say that one more time, Brian, because that's fun to say. I served with McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy is an idiot. He had the opportunity from the beginning to participate in this investigation, but cut with all that bull crap. And this is what I tell all my former Republicans. The Republican Party has no interest. They have never had interest from day one in getting to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. So I don't even pay attention to that argument.
You worked with Jim Jordan. You know Jim Jordan. I have to ask you about this story. I know we tend to disagree on the abortion issue, which is fine. But what do you make of this horrific story of this poor 10-year-old girl in Ohio who gets brutally raped? Her mother takes her to another state to get an abortion. And then Jim Jordan reads an article from the Washington Examiner, which is an alt-right newspaper, and then tweets out basically that the story is a lie, basically calling the little girl and her family liars when we know that that is not true. And then when the suspect admits to the crime, what does Jim Jordan do? He deletes the tweet with no apology, and then he doubled down on what he said when he spoke to Manu Raju from CNN yesterday and claimed he was really just talking about Joe Biden. Joe, this is a man that you worked with. What do you say about this?
Hey, Brian, you and I have talked. This Jim Jordan and I were really good friends. We were really, really close. I don't recognize him. Look, a horrible story. And I don't know many Americans who would say that that 10-year-old should have brought a child, given birth to a baby. What happened was Jim Jordan and a lot of people on the right, started to jump when this story was first put out there. They started to jump day after day after day like it was a hoax and it wasn't true. I'll say this. We live in a world right now, especially on the right, where people don't care about the truth. And Trump and way too many people on the right will lie every single day. So it was important, Brian, that this story was true. Whether it was true or not was important. But you had people like Jordan calling it a lie. And by the way, Tucker Carlson that night, after the suspect was apprehended and it was proven that this wasn't a lie, Tucker Carlson went on TV that night and still called it a lie.
You used to work with a lot of these people, and I've heard you say this time and time again. You've said that about Jim Jordan. You don't recognize him anymore. Joe, what happened to these people? Is it just the Donald Trump effect? You knew these guys. What happened to these people? Jim Jordan's not the only one. There are plenty of others out there, right?
They sold their soul. Brian, plain and simple. Look, they sold their soul. I've had enough conversations with these guys over the years, and they've all told me kind of the same thing. Trump's a bad guy. Don't worry, Joe. He'll be gone in 2 years or 4 years. I'm just going to keep my head down, keep my mouth shut, and wait for the Trump nightmare to end. They sold their soul. Mike Pence did. They sold their soul. Most people in my former world of conservative talk radio sold their soul, because by supporting Trump, Brian, you're guaranteed to keep your radio show. You're going to get good ratings. If you're a congressman, you're going to get reelected. Those guys saw what happened to me. If you do what I did, you'll never get elected as a Republican again, and you'll lose your conservative talk radio show. They don't want that to happen.
Move over, Joe. Move over to the left. Come on. The Democrats will embrace you. I know we've talked about that before.
I'm too conservative to be a Democrat.
Well, you know what? I think there's a lot of Democrats out there that want reasonable people in their party. Not a lot of reasonable people these days on the alt-right, that's for sure. Joe, I want to ask you about Brittany Griner, and you can tell me whether you disagree with this or not. I think there are two sides here. You have LeBron James that says some stupid things, right? I think we can, maybe not the brightest guy in the world. I think he's done a lot of great things, and he's a good man. But, LeBron James makes some statements and basically says, if I'm Brittany Griner right now, I'm second guessing whether I even want to come back to America. Obviously, that was a stupid statement. What Brittany Griner did was clearly stupid, assuming that what she did is true. But with that being said, then you have people on the right that are saying she deserves to be behind bars. She broke the law. Own it. You took a knee during the national anthem. Stay in Russia. There are extremes on both sides. What do you make of this issue, Joe Walsh, and what would you say about the Brittany Griner situation?
I try to ignore all that noise, and I try just to focus on the fact that I want her home. She's an American, Brian, who is being held hostage by a foreign government. I want her home. I say that then hoping that President Biden is doing everything he can behind the scenes. But I've always also said you don't negotiate with terrorists. So it's a real fine line that we have to walk. I just hope and pray she's home real soon, because she is a hostage.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that one. Joe Biden has alluded to the fact that even Kamala Harris has alluded to the fact that Joe Biden will most likely be running again in 2024. I personally do not believe that. From what you hear and what you know, Do you believe that to be true, that Joe Biden is actually seriously considering running again in 2024?
From what I hear, Brian, he wants to. There's no doubt about that. The question is, will he be able to? And I hope he's in the condition where physically he could run. I know he wants to, and I get that the Democrats aren't happy with him. Part of that is their fault. They've got to grow up because if you're a Democrat, Biden's done plenty of damn good things. I'm not a Democrat, and I like a number of the things he's done. But he's not sexy. He's not exciting. He's lost a step. You and I are nervous when we hear him speak. He's old. He's lost a step or two. I'd still rather have him in the White House than a psychopath traitor like Donald Trump, who's old as well, by the way.
Could not agree with you more. Do you think, while you cannot be in your 20s and be the president of the United States, do you agree with me that you probably shouldn't be over 70? I think there should also be an age range for how old you can be to be a president. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd push back on that. I think it's everybody's a different kind of old. Joe Biden clearly has lost a step. Brian, I look at Bernie Sanders, and even though I don't agree with the guy's politics, Bernie's every bit as sharp as a 40 or 50-year-old. So I think a lot of it depends on who you are, more than the age. I will say, though, I look at a guy like Chuck Grassley, who's like 170 years old. He's been in Congress since the 1970s. Some of these people have just been there too damn long.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Joe. A couple more quick questions for you, and I really do appreciate your time. We got to talk about Uvalde. We got to talk.
By the way, quit
Yep.
saying you appreciate my time. I love coming on with you, and I love your radio show. So stop that.
Joe, that is very nice of you.
I mean
Check is in the mail. No, I know you do. I appreciate that, Joe. You know I do. And I always appreciate it when you come on. Uvalde, Texas. A lot of new information has come up here in the last week. We saw the video, the body camera footage, Joe. I talked a little bit with Thomas earlier about how, we see one police officer using hand sanitizer. Meanwhile, kids are getting shot. We know that they started to engage the suspect just minutes after the shooting. Then they retreat and they do nothing. There was no leadership. What do you make of all the new information that has come about over the course of the last week? And then I have a second part of the question I want you to address. You know what? Why don't you answer that one first? Then we'll talk a little bit about Governor Abbott.
I think it's one of the most disappointing stories of the year. And I consider myself to be pro-cop. They didn't do their job, all of them. And don't blame the commanding officer. All 19 cops who stood in that hallway for an hour did nothing while children screamed. It is one of the most devastating, pathetic examples of our law enforcement not doing their jobs that I've ever seen.
What do you make of Governor Abbott? First of all, we've learned today, there were some articles, some publications that he hasn't been back in Uvalde for over a month, from what we're learning. That and the fact that he hasn't been to one funeral. He's refused to go back and speak to any of the grieving families, almost like he just wants this story to disappear and go away without addressing the core issues. What do you make of Governor Abbott as a whole and the way he's handled this whole thing?
I watched my wording, Brian, because I was going to call those police officers cowards, but I want to be really careful. Governor Abbott's a coward because Governor Abbott's just staying the hell away from this. He hasn't been to one of these funerals. He's ignored this community. Why? Because he's afraid. He's afraid to go there. He's afraid to answer the tough questions and take some of the heat. An absolute coward who Texas will probably reelect this year.
You still speak to, on a regular basis, a lot of Republicans that are still in office. I know you do because you've said that on this show. Without giving out any names, I'm just curious. Within the Republican Party now, do they ever talk to you about people like Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene or McCarthy? These are the faces, sadly, of the Republican Party today. There are a lot of good Republicans out there, Joe. I speak to them every day. Some of them come on this show. There are a lot of good Reagan Republicans out there. But the faces of the Republican Party are extremists. We had Lauren Boebert on Twitter yesterday that said she wants Dr. Fauci to be in prison. These are people that are in office. So what do people these days say in the Republican Party about these types of representatives?
Well, Brian, they say the same thing to me privately that they say about Trump. They're nuts. She's nuts. She's crazy. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Herschel Walker. They all say the same thing privately that they've said to me over the years about Trump. And I would tell everybody listening to us right now, don't complain and tell me that Lauren Boebert or Herschel Walker or Marjorie Taylor Greene's crazy and tell me Trump's not. There's no difference between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert. None. And one of them we put in the White House. This is where today's Republican Party is.
So, Joe, I want to ask you this. I had a guy by the name of Jerome Davison on the show last week. Now, I'm sure you've heard of him. This is the Black Republican out of Arizona running for office who put out that commercial saying he needs his AR-15 when he's got a bunch of Democratic Klansmen that could be coming to his home. I'm sure you've seen that commercial. He comes on my show. We start talking about the issue, just like I talked to you about issues. We talk about January 6th, and he says Antifa was behind January 6th. And I said, sir, where are you getting that information from? We've had 700 people that were arrested. We've heard from the attorneys and the judges and all the evidence. And I said, where's your evidence? And his only evidence was he saw some people smoking marijuana. And I said, so your evidence that Antifa was behind January 6th is because you saw people smoking marijuana. Seconds later, he proceeds to call me a white supremacist and a racist. So I'm asking you, Joe, if you were interviewing somebody like that and they responded that way to you, how would you react to that?
Oh my God, Brian, you're so much more patient than I am. Look, I talk to these Trump supporters every day. And what I try to do is just put truth in front of them every day, little nuggets of truth. But most of them, Brian, react to me just like that congressman or candidate reacted to you. And it's always a reminder, let's not forget, 80% of Republicans believe the election was stolen, and 80-some% of the Republicans have no problem with what went down January 6th. Yeah. If those are your voters, it's not at all a surprise that Republicans are electing people, and they will this November, who believe the election was stolen and January 6th was perfectly fine. It's not a surprise at all.
No, it's probably not a surprise to a lot of people. Joe, you got one of the best political podcasts around. I listen to it all the time. White Flag with Joe Walsh. It's so awesome. And again, always appreciate the time. Joe, I love you, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and look forward to having you on again soon.
You rock, Brian. You rock, Brian. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Joe. Love you, man. That's Joe Walsh. He rocks as well, by the way. He's one of my favorite guests. And